Hello everyone and welcome to another session of AP Human Geography with Mr. Elrod. Today we're going to be continuing through Unit 1, and today we're going to be moving on to the next theme of geography, and this theme is called regions. Now, when we talk about regions, what we're referring to really is just a way in which geographers are going to want to organize the landscape. And it's really what they're trying to do is they're trying to look at some of the common features that exist within the landscape, and so this could be something that is either a human feature or a human element, or a physical feature or a physical element, just depending on what characteristic it is that they're looking at. And actually, depending on the characteristic, you could probably group the regions differently, and so we'll see some of that here in just a little bit. Now, like I say there, it says it's the purpose of a region is to try and classify information, again, try to group areas, and a lot of it has to do with you're trying to find the commonalities between those particular areas and see what are the common elements of that, and how is that going to impact the landscape. Again, it is an organizational tool. Humans are pretty much obsessed with trying to organize their world so that they can better understand it, so that they can feel more like they have control over the things that are going on, and their ability to study those things. Now, one of the things about regions is that regions are never really going to be exact in terms of, and what I mean by that is the element that's used to describe that particular region generally is never going to be 100% accurate, meaning that it's not going to be 100% of that particular landscape that's being that is incorporated into that particular region. I'll talk more about that in just a second. So when we talk about the different types of regions, there are three types of regions that are discussed. We have what's called a formal region, functional region, and perceptual region. And in today's video, we're just going to go over the formal and the functional. So when we talk about a formal region, the definition of a formal region is a region in which there is a consistent physical or common physical or cultural characteristic within that particular place. And so what we're looking at is we're trying to look at some sort of unique and uniform cultural or physical characteristic within a particular landscape. So one of the examples I have here is the Appalachian Mountains. So you have the Appalachian Mountain Appalachian Mountain chain, and so this would be considered a formal region because it's a physical feature that extends the length of the eastern seaboard here in the United States. It's a continuous mountain chain, and it's going to be characterized by a certain landform, typically certain types of vegetation, things along those lines. Or we could look at something like the Sun Belt. Now, the Sun Belt really it's kind of tied to a couple of different things. We have the physical, the climatic feature of the Sun Belt, in which we're talking about typically the average temperature and somewhat similar climates, but also we're looking at an area of increased population growth as people are moving from the north and the Midwest and the Northeast down to the South, as not necessarily the environment's become the environment has become more hospitable, but that we have newer technologies that allow for people to come and live in these particular areas. It makes the environment more hospitable. Jobs are coming to these areas a lot because some of the union jobs that became very expensive in the North and Northeast have started to come down to the South, where the South has right-to-work states, and also you have people in the South who are gaining an education and able to take on those factory jobs. The infrastructure has been put in, things like that. Other types of regions you might think of, some other formal regions, you might have something like North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa. It might be considered some formal regions that you could look at. Really, any larger not necessarily climatic, but physical feature like the Amazon rainforest, the Rocky Mountain chain, Sahara Desert. All those would be considered formal regions. When we talk about the functional region, this one's a little bit different in that the functional region is going to be tied to something that actually exists outside of the physical landscape, something that's superimposed onto the landscape, and we'll talk about that in just a second. Now, another term for the functional region is the nodal region. Now, the reason that I bring that up is because when we talk about the nodal region, and this might be helpful for you to remember, is that the nodal region interacts around a node or a point of influence. So when you think about the functional region, think about the node that exists in space, and then the area that it influences. And I apologize for my horribly drawn circle, but that the area outside that it influences, that is the functional region. Some sort of link is established to this particular area because of the node. Now, one of the things about the nodal region is that the node is really the only thing that draws this particular area together and creates the common feature. Now, one of my favorite examples to use for this is a pizza delivery zone. Let's pretend that your node here is a Pizza Hut, okay, and the area around it, that this is the area that influences the area that it services. Now, of course, that could be overlapped by another pizza delivery store. Let's say that maybe this is Domino's or Papa John's, whatever your favorite pizza delivery place is. Let's say it's Papa John's, and it looks like I'm having trouble drawing with my mouse here today. I apologize. Anyway, and so of course those two could overlap, and so you see the area is influenced by both of these pizza delivery stores. Now again, what I said was that in the functional region is something that's superimposed onto the Earth's surface, and so the only reason you have this functional region is because the pizza delivery store was built, and it's possible over time that pizza delivery store could be taken away. And so also when you look at which region is most likely to change, the functional region is very likely to change over time as the different functions that exist on the Earth's surface are either going to, they might change themselves, or they might just simply go away as time progresses. Whereas the formal region typically is going to be the one that is the most resistant to change, unless it's some sort of cultural region. Obviously the physical landscape doesn't change as quickly, and so physical formal regions are much less likely to change. Cultural formal regions are likely to change as people move from one area to another, but the functional region is highly susceptible to change, especially as the different functions within that particular area might change or might go away. And again, this last point is just simply to reiterate this idea of a link being established, and I already mentioned how it's created or placed on the environment by an outside influence. The example that is here in this graphic is looking at radio stations, no, not radio stations, sorry, but TV stations in the area that they service. Now, another way to think of some of these functional regions, this kind of gets to the idea of distance decay and friction of distance, is if you think about radio stations, even though this is TV stations, think about radio stations as how you've been driving, let's say you've been driving on vacation and you're going through town and you're listening to your favorite radio station. The further you get away from that radio station, its radio towers, the influence or the static or the signal for that particular radio station is going to begin to weaken, and you're going to move into the signal of another radio station. So you're going to move from one functional region to the next, and you were able to see the weakening influence of that radio station as you moved outside of its broadcast area. You could hear the radio breaking up and those types of things. So similar thing here, you see the further away we get from the center of the TV station, the weaker the influence gets, and that's what these kind of dashed lines are, that people aren't watching as much. Why? Well, in this case you have multiple options in terms of TV stations that you could watch, and so because people have multiple options, the influence of one is going to weaken, and people are going to pick up on another. And so again, there's that idea of distance decay and friction of distance that we'll talk about later when we get into our conversation on movement. So anyhow, those are two types of regions, the formal region and the functional region. We will look more at the perceptual region in our next video.